Jjk Modulo Chapter 14 is here, and this one comes jam-packed with lore. And we got this brand new color cover from Yuji Iwasaki, so let's just dive straight into it. Alright, so the chapter begins with a conversation between Mino and Crazy Eyes here, and we finally find out her name. It's Miyaguni. So Mino says, "Are you really going to make Yuka do this, Miyaguni?" And she says, "I can't help it. It's our only choice. She told you herself about her illness." And Mino says, "Yeah, but..." And Miyaguni says, "There's no way that we could take on Representative Dabra with the weapons the JDSF and the US military stationed here have. It'll only end with a bunch of pointless deaths. And the US-Japan Security Treaty wouldn't even apply." And Mino says, "What about nuclear weapons from other countries?" And Miyaguni says, "No country wants to bear the shame of dropping nukes on Japan again. Besides, Japan is a latent nuclear power anyway." And Mino says, "Although publicly we uphold the non-nuclear principles, we still have the materials and tech to make the bombs." And she says, "Exactly. So the UN's response was basically, if you want to do it yourself." And then she says, "I guess we're not exactly the most popular." We then launch into some narration from Maru, who thinks to himself, when did all of this start? How long has it been difficult for me to speak with Cross? And then we launch into this flashback where we see Maru and Cross looking about this old, standing in a cave together, and Dura's not there. And Maru is holding a rock in his hand, and he says, "What's this?" And Cross says, "Dad said it was Mole. He was clutching that right until the very end." And then Maru's narration continues. "Mole is a special ore that can convert cursed energy into all forms of energy. It's a very valuable resource in Samoria. Dura said the conflict between the Diskunte and the Rumelians all started because of Mole." We then see Maru in this flashback just stare at this rock and crush it in his hand as Maru's narration continues and says, "But our father didn't leave us Mole. It was just an ordinary rock." And as it gets crushed, Cross is like, "Maru, why did you do that?" And Maru just starts screaming as he starts stomping on the pieces of the rock on the ground. And he says, "Why did he die protecting this? Dad completely lost sight of his job as a warrior. So just forget about him, Cross." And then Maru's narration from the present continues and says, "I didn't want Cross to find out that it was just a plain rock. So I told him that lie. But maybe deep down, I actually meant it." We then jump to another memory, and this is the moment of Dura's death in the Colosseum when Maru freaks out and jumps down to confront Dabra, but Cross stops him. So we pick up in this moment right here, and Cross is like, "Let's just run away. He's going to kill you." And Dabra looks at them and just says, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to harm his face," referring to Dura. And then Maru's narration says, "Cross and Dabra are just both so kind." And then back in the flashback, Cross says, "Maru, you're acting strange." And Maru just looks up at him. And the narration continues, and Maru says, "I was the only one who felt bound to the responsibilities of a warrior. My father and I were a lot alike, stubborn and set in our ways. His obsession with Mole cost him his life, and my obsession with being a warrior continued to hurt Cross." We then jump to Maru in the present, who is just looking completely down and defeated as he's sitting in the Samorian spaceship, and he thinks to himself, "I just want to talk to you one more time and say that I'm sorry, Cross." We then jump to Tsurugi, who is walking through the Samorian spaceship, and he's thinking to himself, just something doesn't seem right with the Samorian story. Their social structure feels way off from what you would expect of a modern nation, and they're way too similar to Earthlings to just brush that off with an explanation like, well, it's because they're aliens. So, are the Diskunte running some kind of centralized government with the Rumelians shoved down into the lower class? Maybe, but that still doesn't answer the biggest question. How did they construct this spaceship? It's capable of carrying 50,000 people through space, even if it is powered by cursed energy. Could the Rumelian tribe really be capable of creating such a sophisticated spacecraft? And even if it was possible with their techniques, there's no way they had enough time. After all, the Rumelians took so long to build that canal. Some irregular, unforeseen thing must have been at work here. And it's at this point that we see Tsurugi has walked up on Cross, and out loud Tsurugi says, "It was you, wasn't it, Maru?" And then we just get this text across the page that says January 14th, 2087, the day of the duel. And Tsurugi says, "The spaceship Nonox is made from Maul. Maul doesn't just respond to cursed energy, though, but to cursed techniques as well, doesn't it? And the Samorians made it all the way to Earth because of a single Jujutsu sorcerer's technique, right?" And Maru says, "It wouldn't have worked with ordinary Maul. The Maul Dura left us was special. It was incredibly rare. Since that area was a place not even the Diskunte could reach, it makes sense that Maul of that quality was there. Also, it wasn't just me. It was my and Cross's technique." And Tsurugi says, "I've been looking for you everywhere. I didn't think that I'd actually find you." And Maru says, "I wanted to have one last proper talk with you, Tsurugi." And Tsurugi says, "Is the reason you can find me and we can speak Japanese like this together because of you and Cross's technique?" And Maru says, "Yeah, it is." And Tsurugi says, "Maru, can you all just leave Japan?" And Maru says, "We can't. Not since the Rumelians found out about the Kalyans." And Tsurugi says, "You know about the duel between Yuka and Dabra, right?" And Maru says, "Just forfeit. Yuka can't win. The result will be the same whether she fights or not." Tsurugi says, "But I don't know that, and that's what's giving me trouble. Yuka is sick, and her illness is progressing far faster than the doctors even expected. I was a total idiot for not realizing something was wrong, but that's not important now. There's something that Earthling sorcerers can use as a last resort when their lives are on the line. It's called a binding vow." And Maru says, "And it boosts their cursed energy and techniques? Still, it wouldn't mean that she could beat Dabra." And Tsurugi says, "Yuka's been searching for something worth staking her life on all this time. She thought since she's going to die anyway, she might as well die for someone else's sake. But I want to stop her from fighting in this duel. Today's not the day Yuka should die. And if she only has 3 months left, then I want her to live out those 3 months. Even if it only ends up being 1 week or even just 1 day. That's what it means to be an older brother. Right, Maru?" Tsurugi then says, "Please, take the rest of the Samorians and just leave Earth." And Maru says, 50,000 of my compatriots are aboard the Nonax, including many women and children. When we left Samoria, it took almost 2 years to reach the Earth, even using our technique to its fullest extent. But we finally found a place where we can put down roots. Up until now, everyone was terrified that we just drift around forever and end up a speck of dust in the vast darkness of outer space. There's no place left for us on Samoria, and there's no guarantee that we could find another planet." And as he says that, he jumps down to the ground to confront Tsurugi. And he says, "I'm sorry, but we won't leave Earth. And if you're going to talk about Yuka, then what about the Kalyans? And what about Cross?" And Tsurugi says, "My bad. I phrased that wrong." And both of them start to grab their weapons. Tsurugi then pulls out his blade as it erupts in flames, and he says, "I meant to say, get the hell out of here, Maru." And Maru readies his blade and says, "I can't because I'm a warrior." And that's where the chapter ends, with these two about to full on clash. Absolutely beautiful chapter, man. So much development of Maru here. Originally presented as the fun, lighthearted, goofy of the two twins, with Cross being the more stalwart, resilient one. But realistically, as Maru said, you and Dabra have always been kind. I've been the stubborn one that keeps getting us into trouble because he's so steadfast on just being a warrior. A stubbornness he claims he got from his father, who he resents his father for dying to protect this mole, which was just an ordinary rock, right? It's so good. And now seeing where this has led both Maru and Tsurugi as these older siblings that feel this sense of responsibility for different reasons, now fighting for what they think they have to, but it's so ultimately tragic at the same time, Gege Akutami. Also, we pretty much already knew this, but strict confirmation that it was their curse technique that enabled this scientifically impossible travel to the Earth. For those of you that didn't see, I put out like a 10-minute video a couple weeks back speculating on what this curse technique would be. And again, there's still so much we don't know, but I feel like it's looking more and more like that. Like that their curse technique is harmony. And because they can like connect two things the way they found Tsurugi and stuff, they were looking for a new home, right? So their curse technique found the Earth as the answer to that. And then in order to connect them, they needed a spaceship. So it built a spaceship. Like, so that all checks out to me. Then we got a little bit of a breadcrumb on what Yuka's plan might be. If you've been watching some of my other videos this past week, you know, we've been talking about Rika, we've been talking about Maharaga, but it seems as if a binding vow is the ace up their sleeve, trading her life in exchange for a huge boost in power, which would make sense since she's terminally ill anyway, right? So it'd be interesting to see like what exactly that binding vow entailed, and what exactly her plan would be. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts there. Anyways, incredible chapter, incredible double spread to end the chapter. I'm just sad that this is a short run series and we're virtually halfway through, but y'all let me know your thoughts. And as always, thanks for watching.